In our second How to Fix Democracy series, we've really been focusing on the relationship, or perhaps lack of relationship, between capitalism and democracy. Many of the people we've spoken to have suggested that the inequities of capitalism have created a permanent underclass of people who have been so left out of the system that they've lost faith with democracy. Many of them, though, have spoken perhaps anecdotally about these people. I'm really pleased that our guest today on How to Fix Democracy, Arlie Hochschild, has also spent a lot of time with this underclass. Her prize-winning latest book, Strangers in Their Own Land, was a reflection of the 5 years, I think, she spent in Louisiana. Is it fair, though, Arlie, that many people, particularly on the left, we're talking to each other in Berkeley, the heart of the American left, that many people on the left, and I get the sense that this in part at least drove your book or your decision to spend so much time in Louisiana, that many people on the left have no understanding of the people who have lost out in capitalism.
I think that's right, and that's what animated my curiosity to get out of a left bubble and take my alarm system off and permit myself a great deal of curiosity to get to know people in an equal and opposite bubble. Because if we're going to fix democracy, I think we have to fix listening. We have to fix the voices that don't feel heard. And that's one of the big splits and growing chasms in America today that's preventing a listening and a hearing and a potential conversation. Not that we're ever going to agree on a lot of things, but unless we get a respectful conversation going without contempt, we won't be able to fix democracy. So the spirit in which I set out was one of a studied openness, and it was an amazing experience, actually, because there are some bridge builders on the other side, too. And what we're building a bridge over is a chasm between two truths. For the people on the other side, the radical right, they are, I think, the Tea Party in particular, the elite of the left behind. They are, and the left behind are people who, since the 1970s, when globalization really took hold, and there were offshoring of big companies and automation, and male wages began to precipitously decline, and wage earning, and it has for all white men, blue collar, high school educated blue collar men, really down. And if there isn't a narrative about that, if there isn't a conversation about that, if you're supposed to think that everything else is fine and it's a matter of pulling your bootstraps up, people were caught between the ideology that they ardently held, I'm responsible for my own fate, and the truth that they weren't, and that something structural had fallen out from under their feet. So cultural differences there are, but those are the basic bones of the split and the problem. And there's on top of that another problem, which is that we're not even trying to talk. So what I did was ask, where is the heart of the radical right? It's in the South. Where in the South? Mostly in the super South. And there were two states that represented the super South. One was Louisiana, one was Mississippi. I knew one person in Louisiana. And so I took a leap and went there. One survey of political attitudes in Louisiana indicated a full half of residents of the state believed in the basic principles of the Tea Party. That is, and they fit a red state paradox. And I carried that little paradox around like a kind of a backpack. How could it be that across the country it is the poorest states, the states with the poorest, lowest income, the highest crime rate, the most disrupted families, the highest incidence of alcoholism and drug addiction, the most filled jails, the most pollution and lowest life expectancy are also the same bunch of states that receive more money from the federal government in aid than they give to it in tax dollars and revile the federal government.
And as you note in the book, in terms of the paradox, it's something that the writer Thomas Frank wrote about.
Yes.
What's the matter with Kansas? You took that paradox down to Louisiana. You mentioned that you went down to listen. If I was to caricature you, if I was a cartoonist, I would draw you with massive ears. You've actually got very nice ears, but you went down to listen. What did you hear, Arlie, about democracy itself?
Strangers is not a book of reportage. It's a book of translation. I'm trying to get people who despise the radical right and those who feel themselves in decline to hear what the truth feels like to people on the other side.
It's a book of stories. It's of narratives.
It's a book of stories as they seem to a radically different group of people and as told by those people. So I'm trying to tell their story in a way that I think it could be heard. That's what translators do, and that's what I felt.
So you see yourself as a translator of the radical
I do.
right?
I do. And I did the translation by means of an idea called the deep story. And what is a deep story? A deep story is a situation that magnifies a host of previous situations, that feels fraught, that feels true. You take facts out of the deep story. You take moral precepts out of the deep story. It's just what's the distillation of feeling that you have about what feels true. And you tell it like you tell a dream. It's a metaphor. And the metaphor is one of waiting in line. So you, the right-wing white person, we'll say man, is waiting in line and as in a pilgrimage facing up the hill to the American dream. You feel patient, you feel like you've worked hard, you're obeying all the rules, and you've been waiting a long time, your feet are tired. The white men hadn't had a raise in 2 decades, the men I interviewed. And then in another moment of this right-wing deep story, you notice some line cutters. Well, who are they? They are African Americans and women who finally have been allowed to have access to jobs and that were forbidden to them previously. Another moment of the right-wing deep story, there's Barack Obama waving to the line cutters. Oh, is he a line cutter too? How did he get to Harvard or Columbia? Who paid that bill? His mother was a single mom, not rich. Something rigged. So there's a rigging going on. And then another moment of the deep story, while you're waiting in line, getting pushed back, you're not looking in back of you. No, you're just looking ahead and you're seeing yourself pushed back.
Arlie, when I was reading your book, which is a wonderful read, by the way. Congratulations. It's so human, and you really capture the experience of these people, and you have such a sympathetic voice. I was waiting for the penny to drop, and it never did, because on the one hand, you describe the inequities of American capitalism. You describe the way in which this white underclass has been abused and exploited by mostly the economic system. One of the stories was a man who worked for a large corporation. He was fired for something he did nothing wrong, and it essentially ruined his life. And you describe that wonderfully. And the thing that's so, I guess, frustrating, and perhaps it's because I'm a Berkeley liberal, is that they don't come to the same conclusions as me. Why aren't these people making the next step and saying, the problem is capitalism. The problem is that the dominant economic class. The problem is the iniquities between the working class or the sub-working class and this new millionaire or billionaire class.
It's curious that was precisely the kind of line of questioning that was in the back of my mind in that backpack, what could account for the red state paradox. I think part of this, let me first say that there's more identification than you would think, and it comes out at the edge of their conversations. One man was very staunch Trump guy. I asked him, well, what's been the best governor you've had around here? Oh, Huey Long. Huey Long. Well, did you know that he was socialist? You know, there's chicken in every white pot and chicken in every black pot, Huey Long, at least as he started out. Well, yeah, that was good. That was good. And I said, who else would you be interested in? He said, well, Bernie Sanders. So there is more of a glimmer of identification, that's the first thing I want to say, than one would imagine. It gets lost in the polarization.
Arlie, you were down there in the Tea Party days. Tea Party sounds slightly old-fashioned. Today it's just Trump. And Donald Trump seems to be, in many ways, deeply contemptuous of the traditions of American democracy, of the constitutionalism underpinning the American experiment. In your conversations with the people you met in Louisiana, in the fact that they were clearly being left out of the system, did they share that contempt for the formal legalities of the system? Did they see those as essentially fraudulent?
The Tea Party has been swallowed up by Donald Trump, and the Republican Party has been swallowed up by Donald Trump, who, as you say, is contemptuous of the whole idea of checks and balances, of independence, of government officials, that they would, like the military, act for the good of the whole. He's politicizing everything he touches, and they. So your question is, they go along with that, or do they understand that this is a violation? They're mixed and they're confused. But what they all say is there's nobody else that seems to stand up for them. And what I feel has happened is this. And we have to go to emotion.
Which is the core of much of your academic sociology.
That's right. What I think has happened is that from 70s on, the working class took a big hit. But it lived its daily lives finding meaning in the idea of individualism, of individual responsibility, so that if you are earning less than your dad did, or your son is earning less than you. If you're going down, if you got fired, if you got sick, and because of pollution, because it's you're living in an unregulated state, if all of that bad stuff is happening to you, and you think, gosh, I cause the good and bad in my life, you feel guilty. And with the magic wand, someone can say, it's not your fault. I love the undereducated, says Trump, and it's somebody else's fault. It's not your fault. So that lift of guilt, I think, however idiotic Trump can seem to the rest of us, telling us to drink Clorox to get rid of COVID-19, the power of lifting away guilt and promising a better tomorrow kind of thing, a better tomorrow that's like yesterday, that is hugely powerful, because the people, I think, the blue-collar class and lower middle are depressed. There is a whole opiate addiction, diseases of despair that are hitting just that class. You're seeing a higher rate of overdoses, of suicides, of alcohol addiction and death. And I saw it. There was kind of a discouragement.
Finally, Arlie, someone's going to win in 2020, for better or worse. Either the left or the right, either Trump or the people who oppose Trump. How are we going, and you indicated this earlier, that we're failing to be able to talk to one another. How are we going to get that empathy, that feeling back into America?
I think we're going to need new structures. There used to be two ways in which the two classes came together. One was through the labor union movement. And when you had a high proportion of people in it, you had blue and white collar, you had black and white, and a focus on common interests. You also had a compulsory military, where again, black and white and upper and lower served together to some extent. And those two institutions, those class mixers, are gone now. So we're going to need something that does that. So, but I think we will need structurally. It isn't enough to just say we need more nice people. What we need are new structures through which a Job Corps, for example, there could be a new compulsory year that high school students of every class and region get together and say, okay, let's get our solar panels up. Let's renovate these low-cost houses and get the homeless off the streets. So there are a number of ways that new structures can be built. And in fact, after just this last year, the NewsHour, CBS, came down to Lake Charles with me to re-interview some of the people in the book, and a young man, recent Yale graduate, came down too and met the people that I interviewed, and has now started a high school exchange program. There are now 22 different high schools and 300 students who are meeting on Google meetups, and who are going to, in different regions, South, Lake Charles, and then there's Wellesley, Massachusetts, there's East Texas is another one. And if you get students, you don't start talking politics, you just start region and public schools. And I think that way the South should go north, the North should go south, the coast should go inland, inland goes to the coast. You give people training in civics and in democracy and in mediation. How do you listen? How do you talk? And get this going on a national scale, and I think would do a lot to strengthen democracy in America.